Born in 1878 in Louisville, C. Edwin Gheens could have taken a much different path than the one he ultimately chose. As a state tennis champion at Male High School, he was preparing for his first year at Yale University. But a bout with typhoid fever changed those plans as he put away dreams of athletic fame in the Ivy League, skipped college entirely, and went to work with his father and uncles in their wholesale grocery business. It was a good living, but one aspect of the job was the key that unlocked all the possibilities to come and laid the foundation for a future fortune.
They would go to New Orleans to buy produce that they would bring up the Mississippi and Ohio rivers to Louisville and then on up to Cincinnati. And during one of those trips right after the Civil War, they discovered this property, which is in Lafourche Parish, about 50 miles southwest of New Orleans. And over time they assembled 50,000 acres of contiguous property, which became known as Golden Ranch Plantation.
With his family now owning a plantation near New Orleans and a grocery business in Louisville, C. Edwin Gheens still felt the need to strike out on his own, and at the turn of the century, he did.
But in 1899, he decided to invest in a local candy company that was founded in 1833 by a Swiss immigrant named Peter Broadus. And over time, Mr. Gheens took control of that company, took full control in 1920. And his candy company was the first love of his business life.
The Bradis and Gheens Candy Company was not only the first love of his business life, but perhaps the greatest, as he developed a reputation as a fair man who took a hands-on approach to his candy making and had a benevolent attitude toward his workers. But in 1927, fate again stepped in, and news from the Louisiana plantation that was purchased so long ago changed everything.
His father had some business reversals in the 1920s. And when he died, Mr. Gheens discovered that the property was heavily mortgaged and that the lenders were in the process of foreclosure. He had just married, and so he took his new bride and they went to New Orleans to buy the property out of foreclosure from the lenders because he wanted to, quote, protect the family's good name. And he was rewarded for that good deed about 10 years later when oil and gas was discovered on the property.
And so Edwin bought the property to keep it in the family, but then 8 or 10 years later he signed a lease with Amarada Hess. They drilled, they discovered oil, the war was coming, the prices were moving up in the oil and gas area, so there was exploration, and he developed the minerals in the property, which gave him some great wealth.
But even before the full oil and gas potential of the plantation became clear, C.E. Gheens took personal responsibility for it and ran it with the same passion and compassion as he did his candy company.
He was a very kind-hearted boss. There were over 100 families that lived on the plantation, sharecroppers, if you will. He never once evicted anyone from the plantation. And times were tough, particularly in the 1930s during the Depression. And he would frequently extend credit to the families. He even provided the families with mules so that they could plow their land around their homesteads to raise food.
And if you think about the early years, those plantations were really run by, not the machines of today, but people. There were over 100 people that lived on the plantation, and the Gheens took care of medically and all other ways, the education and so forth, of the children and the people that lived on the plantation. So he was very hands-on, as was she in the operation of the plantation.
Once the full economic potential of the Louisiana gas and oil reserves were realized, C. Edwin Gheens went from being a successful businessman to an incredibly wealthy businessman. And this is what allowed him to make a breathtakingly generous gesture that our community benefits from to this day.
Because he and Mrs. Gheens did not have any children, they decided in 1957 to found the Gheens Foundation. And as you look back, that was probably his signature achievement. That has touched vastly more lives than any of his business endeavors. Now, during their lifetimes, the foundation made about $1.3 million in grants to charitable organizations. Since Mrs. Gheens' passing in 1982, the foundation has made approximately $80 million in grants, almost all of them right here in metropolitan Louisville.
It would take far too long to list all the organizations and causes that have benefited from the generosity of the Gheens Foundation, but one that stands out is the Gheens Professional Development Academy, a training facility where public and private school teachers and administrators come together to share insights, hone their skills, and explore the leading edge of educational thought.
What we expect of our students is to reach and be creative and have high standards. What the Gheens have done is helped our students also have high expectations for their work and what they do, and have really enabled them to be truly innovative in the classroom. Funding in public education is always inconsistent, so to have this stable source of funding, again, to promote professional development that's innovative and to promote support for our teachers, wouldn't have been possible without the Gheens Foundation.
Mr. and Mrs. Gheens are, to many Louisvillians, still somewhat of a mystery. And part of our job here at the Foundation is to remind the community of the fabulous gift that Mr. and Mrs. Gheens bestowed on this city, a gift that keeps giving. And it is our intention to be here in perpetuity. So I'd like to think that the best is yet to come.